So today's kind of a special day. We have a couple of guest speakers for us today, just to share some just neat life and truth. And the first one is Alyssa Vaden. Let's give her a hand.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for letting me speak today. I read over the Torah portion, so I'm going to talk a little bit about just how I was able to relate to this Torah portion in my personal life, and then some analysis that, some insight that I think God gave me to share with you guys, and some encouragement. So I'm just going to start. I've always considered myself as someone who trusts Yahweh. I certainly have had a lot of practice in surrendering the outcomes of difficult situations to Him. Oh yeah, and I'm going to be using this because I get stage fright, so sorry. Just a couple of situations that come to mind that were really hard for me to deal with was in Cape Town, the 2010 recession. I believe that was 2008 for you guys, I think. Don't know. And then getting married to Daniel, who's from America, and I was from South Africa, so doing the fiancé thing, the fiancé visa thing, marriage thing, and then green card thing. There's a lot of things to deal with. But I got through it all. I did a lot of surrendering and just taking all my frustrations and worries and just casting them at Yahweh's feet. But come March 2020, after a year of having it easy, you know, compared to the high-stress life that I lived in Cape Town, I figured I had it easy until, March 2020. And I was faced with a lot of stress and a lot of worry that was familiar to me, so I started pulling out my tools that I'd learned over the years. I started thinking realistically, being practical and making plans, assessing situations, obsessing over them, and just coming up with plans, all to make sure that things went the way that I wanted them to, the way I needed them to, the way that I'd been praying they would be throughout all of the planning and obsessing and assessing. But about a month ago, I was really, really scared. I was sick to my stomach, and I didn't know what the post-COVID and election future would look like. And I had heard a lot of other people's fears and concerns and worries, and I had my own, and it was just getting to be a bit much. But I realized that I was dealing with fear. And that was a hard realization to me because, I'd been telling myself I was being realistic, I was being practical by preparing for the worst. But the hard realization was that I was actually just writhing in fear and letting it get to me, which isn't acting in God's way, in God's image. So I'm going to look through the beginning bit of this Torah portion, and I think you'll see the push and pull between Jacob and fear and trust, and maybe you'll see that he handles stress in a very familiar way, it's nice to see that these men of God are just human, and they do a lot of the same things we do. Okay, so Jacob is faced with returning to Esau. The loss that he'd heard, Esau wanted to kill him for stealing his birthright and then his father's blessing. So Jacob goes through a lot of effort to try to appease Esau. He sends messengers before him to try to make things right and pave the way for him, but the messengers get back to him with some bad news. They tell him that Esau plus 400 men are approaching, and Jacob's just worried and fearful. He thinks, oh my goodness, Esau, who wanted to kill me, plus 400 men are coming. They're going to wipe me out. My whole line, my family, all the people I care about. He gets really, really scared. And how I think that's realistic. I think that's a realistic fear, a realistic worry. Esau plus 400 men means danger. So that's what maybe I'd feel the same way. But then we look back and we realize that Yahweh had actually made a promise to him, a promise to Jacob to make nations out of him, and had always been with him the whole way. So, I used to think, Jacob, why aren't you trusting Yahweh? He's proven himself to you and your fathers before you, but why aren't you trusting him? Well, I think I did a lot of the same things this time around with COVID. I had a lot of the same fears. But yeah, back to what I wrote. So, Jacob, now hearing that Esau's coming with 400 men, starts to make plans to ensure that the promise God gave him does actually come true. His first port of call is not just to trust God and take him at his word, that he's going to keep his promise. But so Jacob now decides to divide his camp into 2 camps, thinking that, well, if the one gets attacked, at least the other will get freed. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but that's a horrible place to be in, like mentally, to divide your camps, everything you have, your servants, your family, to divide them into 2 and think, I have to lose one. I mean, that's horrible. Just all that stress and preparing yourself for the worst, just so unnecessary. But right there, right in his fear, I'm sure he felt like that was a realistic assumption and very necessary to think. So right there, yeah, we see Abraham making his own decisions and not trusting God's going to keep his word, and causes him unnecessary pain and heartache. Push forward, and we see that Jacob actually, he prays, finally. Like, you were thinking, finally, Jacob, you're actually going to trust God. He prays this very honest, very genuine prayer because he's in just so much turmoil over his fear. And he prays, and Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, and he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. I mean, it's all right there. Jacob knew God's promise. In this prayer, we see he reminds God of his promise and humbly comes before him, exalts God, admits his failures. And I think that's a really human moment for us, and I'm sure we can all relate to that. And I think that's what God wants from us. He wants us just to be humble before him. And just trust Yahweh's deliverance, because we all have our way of keeping our family safe, keeping ourselves healthy and happy, and keeping our finances secure, etc. But how often do we look at the storm ahead of us, look at our capabilities, and think, no, God, I'm just turning to you. Please, Lord, deliver me from this evil, this fear, whatever situation it is, because you can do it and I can't. And I just think that is elevating God, realizing his sovereignty, and just his control over our lives. But Jacob's struggle with fear isn't over. Again, he makes a plan. Right after he prays this, he sends outrageous gifts to Esau, and we see him acting in fear again. In his own words, thoughts, he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. I feel like that's just a slap in the face to Yahweh right there, because he just prayed this awesome, humble prayer, but he doesn't really believe that Yahweh's going to come through for him. So he needs to make a plan, send gifts and gifts, because maybe, perhaps, he'll be accepted if he sends those gifts. Jacob goes to sleep, arises that same night, probably because he couldn't sleep from fear, is my guess. He takes all his possessions and family, and he sends them away from him, and he sits alone. But here he meets God. He wrestles with God. Jacob wrestled with the man, as it says in the scriptures, all night. When the man sees he won't prevail, he pushes Jacob's hip socket out of place. I read up on this comparison, and I really loved this one comparison that I found was that of a martial arts master or teacher teaching his students. When a master teaches his students, they spar, and he matches them at their level. If they're just practicing and sparring, he just goes light and spars with them. But if they get frustrated and angry and start doing making hard blows or dirty moves that aren't really in the rule book, then the master has to stop that. He has to block that and then give that crushing blow, which I see as the hip socket thing. And I thought that was a really neat comparison, because Yahweh meets us where we are. If we've been rebellious, he instructs us. He comes down on us with that rod of iron, and he says, no, you will no longer walk this way. And that's because we are his children, and we are under his grace and his guidance, even when we're not acting like it. I just lost my place. And that, that, like I said, that hit home for me, because we do spiritually wrestle with Yahweh. We wrestle our fears and our flesh and our sin, and that does wrestle with what Yahweh wants for us. But more importantly, he meets us where we are. And the one thing Jacob did right here is he never let go. And that's really interesting. Even in that lowest point where his joint was out of place, he didn't walk away from God. He hung on and he demanded a blessing. Because deep down, Jacob knew he wasn't going to get through this with gifts, with contingency plans. He was only going to get through this with Yahweh's blessing. After that, Jacob was blessed. He was a changed man. He no longer walked in the way that he walked, and he walked differently. Literally, he had a limp, and he had the name Israel now. He was blessed. He had a new name and a new walk. And I really think we can learn from that, because Jacob never cuts himself off from God throughout his life and throughout his low points, and neither do we. That's honestly what sets us apart as believers. We know to our core that we are Yahweh's, and that we do walk in his ways even when we're wrestling him. As we see, Jacob was blessed by this interaction, by this whole situation. At the end of it, when he meets Esau greets him with kisses and tells him to keep his gifts. God just comes through just so overwhelming. He doesn't only give us what we need, what we pray for and ask for. He gives us everything we want, and so much more than what we think. So I have 2 take-home points here. The one is Jacob acted in fear a lot, but it didn't remove him from God's grace. But it did cause him unnecessary hassles and worries. He didn't need any of his contingency plans, which is very relatable for me. For the longest time, I've battled fear, and I didn't even realize it. Throughout all of the giants I've faced, Yahweh has come through for me, and always at the last minute as well. But it's just a wonderful test of faith. But I did have a lot of stumbling blocks along the way because of my own interventions and fear. And I've had a lot of unnecessary stress from that, and a lot of strained relationships have come out of some of that fear and not just surrendering and submitting. So I would encourage all of you to examine your thoughts, your hearts, and your minds and your actions, and just to see, is fear hiding in you? It was hiding in me for the longest time. Is it hiding in you, masked as something else? You're trying to be innocent, but not quite. And if it is, it may be causing unnecessary conflict amongst each other or within you, and some discord that you don't need. And I would encourage you just to take that fear, if you recognize it as fear, and just surrender it to Yahweh and just put it at his feet, and that's what he wants from us. Second take-home point is we wrestle with God. We do. We battle fear, we battle stress, self-righteousness, and all of it. But the thing that Jacob did right is he didn't let go, and we need to do the same. As believers, it does set us apart from the world, because at our core, we intrinsically know that we are his, and we love him, his right rulings, his ways. Our whole everything just revolves around Yahweh and Yeshua, our Messiah. So I would just say, even though we wrestle with him, just know that don't let go, because he doesn't want you to. And that way you'll always be under his wing, under his guidance and his blessing. Which is, where else would we be but with the Lord of hosts? So whoever chose that song, it's my favorite. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you, Alyssa. That's good stuff. Good job. So, next up, and I apologize, we don't have a slide for you, but would you welcome Tracy Pedersen, please?
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alyssa. That was awesome. And happy Thanksgiving late Thanksgiving to everybody. Andrew was thanks. Andrew was in town visiting for Thanksgiving, and we're expecting our 4th grandchild. Isn't that awesome? Thank you. He was also helping us with a remodel with Greg, so thank you, Greg. And they work great together. Those guys are quite the team. Turn this over. Sorry. So does anybody else here have COVID fatigue? I know I have COVID fatigue. It's like Jacob. It seems like we're all running from something, Yeah, and fatigue, hearing about it. Yeah. I was going to get up here originally with my mom, and unfortunately she can't make it. So I hope she's watching from home. I'm sure she is. And it's been... we're just going to talk about our trip to Houston, but it's been about 3 years now since she was diagnosed with cancer, and she's doing great, and I think that in itself is a miracle. So we're still, thank you. We're still praying for complete healing. So we put it off for about a year because of this COVID thing. That was when it was peaking in Houston or whatever. So. And it was more dangerous to go there than it was for the cancer itself. So, so I wanted to get up here with her, but she can't make it. But maybe we can get up some other time and talk about it. But for now, I did talk to her. For now, we just both wanted to thank you for all, and tell you how blessed we are and inspired by all your prayers and support. And thank you very much for that. And that's about it. Jacob himself had a lot of challenges, and he made some decisions that he had to deal with and was fearful over, and but we all, God is with us, and he's merciful. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Tracy. And last, but certainly not least, as far as I know, because I'm not quite on top of things this morning, is Pastor Karen.
Yeah, you're getting the shirt. Oh. Okay. Whoa. Sorry, got up too fast. My head went ahead of me. Okay. Well, Alyssa, thank you very much for laying out the whole story, because it's a great witness to me that we're on the same page and that the message is what God wants us to hear, because that's exactly the same area that I focused in, was that section of this portion. But anyway, I do have a little bit different slant on some of these things and some things that I also wanted to share. But, you know, we've been going to a lot of different prayer meetings, right? We've been going to these vigils. We've been called to prayer on the internet, on, you know, through messages and things like that. And so the authority of God and how we pray has really been on my heart this week a lot. And understanding God-given authority in our prayers, in our prayer life. And as I began, as I sat down and was reading the portion, and I saw, okay, Jacob sent or charged angels, it says, or men. There's, we don't know for sure, ahead of him to impress and to terrify Esau. That's what the sages say about it. But yeah, he wanted to make a statement. But he had authority somewhere given to him to send messengers, to send them out, to command them, to charge them with something. I heard a prayer I think it was this week, and many of you probably did, the Valkyrie thing. Yeah, that really impressed me when I listened. And I thought, I don't pray this way. And it takes a lot of faith, but it's an authority. And it came upon me that he has given us that authority. He has, and what even the sages say here about Jacob was he had authority over the angels. He had authority to command them to go. If they were angels, and even if they weren't, and they were just men, and they don't agree, not all of the sages agree on that either, but he had an authority that was given to him to send them out to check things out, you know, which they did and came back with a bad report, or what he saw as a bad report. I won't go into it. You did a good job of laying out the story for me, so I don't have to go into detail about all those things. But you know, in Matthew 16:19, it says that I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. That's that authority. That's where we know it comes from, but we see it back all the way back in Genesis, right? That he gave it there. That term, to bind and to loose, means to permit or to forbid. That is the Jewish understanding of that term. By an indisputable authority. That indisputable authority is Yahweh. His authority is not disputed in the heavenly realms, in the spiritual realms. Hasatan knows he's got that Yahweh has the ultimate authority. So it's not disputed at all. And I started to kind of try to give it an earthly understanding, and I just thought of this example as a parent giving a kid a credit card to use. You know, the parent has the indisputable authority to use that credit card with the credit company, right? Because they've applied, they've gotten approved, they have the backing. So they've been given authority to use a card, and they can give it to be used by somebody. And that parent gives a kid a credit card to use. That kid has authority to use it, right? He can go out and he can charge. But there are limits on the authority. You can't exceed the credit limit. Don't use it for something illegal. And I think that's the same way it is with the authority God gives to us. It isn't for our personal or fleshly use, but it's for, I read one thing, it said it's for fighting injustice. To set the things that are not just. That's out of Isaiah, actually. But his authority is indisputable. When he gives us his authority and we're under his authority, then we have his authority. So the kid that uses the credit card, you don't give it to a kid that you don't trust, that you know is dishonest, that is a liar, that goes out and does his own thing. You wouldn't do that, and neither does God give authority to the rebellious child of his. You have to have that, you have to be in line. You have to uphold the credit limits, basically. And that's the Torah, right? Those are the boundaries. We know what they are. We know the righteous lifestyle. And when we have that lifestyle, when we are walking as best we can to uphold his word and his ways, then that authority is there for us. If you can picture when you need to call upon it, this example, it's in your pocket. You can use it. It's ours. But we don't truly believe. We don't truly believe it. And what I saw in that man that was praying that prayer or commanding or demand or, saying these statements, and I honestly, I said, oh, Lord, I don't know if I can pray this way. I agree with him. I agree with the cause and what he's standing for and what he's saying. And I hope, hi, Joy, welcome back. I agree, but, that takes so much faith. Lord, help my unbelief. We heard that quoted the other night during our prayer time. But yes, Lord, help our unbelief. And so that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. But what I saw also is that how we get these things and how we act on it is that, in our lives, we have permitted realms of death in our lives, and then we struggle to shake free of them. We open the doors to depression and anger, lust, bitterness, jealousy, fear, another one, gossip, etc. But we have full authority to loosen ourselves, to loosen that hold that they have on us. How? By our actions. It's by our actions. It's not by our words. Don't look at me like that. No. It is. It's by our actions. It's by turning away. It's by closing those doors. And it is by the action we take. And that's what I saw with Jacob. Jacob, yes, he became frightened at the report of his brother coming with 400 men. It shook him. And yes, he did have authority. He did know that God was with him. He did know he had the promises of God. But what did he do? He divided his camps. He sent them out. But then he cried out to Yahweh. I think of what, Joshua Aaron told us about the song Hoshiana. That song touches my heart. I love it so much. But it's, save us, God. Save us. And I think that's probably what he said. He probably cried out, oh, save us, rescue me. He feared for his whole family, yet he still sent them ahead of himself. It's kind of, wow. But he reminds God of the promises, just like Alyssa told us. He reminds God of the promise. And I think more and more I am doing that when I pray. I'm reminding God of his covenant, of the things that he has. It's not that he needs reminding, but it's saying, this is what I believe in, and I'm standing on it. It's showing our faith to him when we do that. And then it says, a man wrestled with Jacob and dislocated his hip in order to overcome him because he saw he wasn't going to prevail against him unless he did something. And I'll tell you, how many have had their flesh wounded in wrestling with God because he wasn't going to prevail any other way? Yeah. And I don't think I'd ever really noticed that in this portion before. So even after 18 years of going through all these portions and many more years of knowing this story before that, but seeing it like that and realizing, yeah, he has to wound us sometime in order to truly have victory over us and our flesh because it's so strong. So somehow, through this struggle and wrestling, Jacob knew this was not an ordinary man. And he wouldn't, like Lacey said, he would not let go. He asked for a blessing. And it was like the man or the angel or whatever, the divine presence, it says, that he wrestled with, let him know, it's not important that you know my name, but I'm telling you your name, and your name is now Israel, because you have striven with the divine, and you have overcome. So, again, jumping ahead, it's funny how it cracks me up, because I was listening to your message, and it's like, okay, you said pushing forward or something, and I looked at my note, because jumping ahead's what I wrote down. But he gets to Esau. He gets to that place, and they embrace and they weep. And what he had set apart for Esau, this tribute, these gifts, he insisted on giving it to him. And I thought about that. I thought, would we? We set apart something as a tribute. And there are times, yes, it was his thing. He sent ahead in order to gain favor with his brother. But sometimes that's what it takes. He stole from his brother. He did do a crooked thing against him. And so I think there was something that needed to be sent like that in order to show, his, that he deserved it, for one thing. So it's send a gift. Sometimes we need to make things right with a brother or someone, and we need to send ahead a tribute. And it may not be to appease, but it's because it's the right thing to do. Pardon me. So that was an area of action that he took, but he sent that ahead, and he kept it set apart, because when Esau said, I don't need this, it's okay, you keep what's yours, let it be yours. But it had already been set apart, kadosh. Think of that word. It had already been made kadosh. It wasn't his to keep anymore. And he said, no, you keep it. And of course he accepted it right away. But I thought about that, and I thought, wow, it was a lot that he gave him, and even though he was incredibly wealthy and had a lot, would we have continued to let that be set apart, or would we have said, oh, okay, if you don't want it, okay, I'll give it to someone else or whatever. So I thought that showed an action and a character in him. He did not change his plan, and I think, so often, I know I've talked about it before in past years, but so often changing a plan messes us up so much. Make a decision, stick to it. Go forward, commit. If you're going to try the vault, stick to it. Don't change your mind in the middle of it, right? As a gymnast, I just remember that coming out. Just like, commit to it, or you're going to get hurt, if you don't. So then, as they have wept with each other and loved on one another, then Esau asks to travel with him. Let's travel together. Let's be joined, and we'll go on to this other place together, to Seir. And Jacob had no intention of going there. He really didn't. He immediately makes an excuse and says, yeah, but I've got all these young ones, and I've got all these animals, and it's too much. It would be too hard to keep up. And so then, of course, Esau says, well, I'll give you men to help you, so that we can. But he refuses that too. And what I saw there was that character to not become entwined. He knew he was on a different pathway. He knew that he was set apart from his brother. They could make peace, they could weep together, but they they were on different pathways, and he would not allow himself to become entangled with Esau's life. And I thought that was a really good step. And I think it's a real good point for us to recall too. There are some we need to make peace with, we need to be not at odds with, but we do not need to entangle ourselves with those who are not on the same pathway, that are not walking with us. So I know it felt really good for him to reunite with his brother, and how tempting was that to want to just, just be there, be loved, and go for it, Probably they could have been even wealthier, is probably, could have been a thought that flashed through his head, look what we could do. He's already wealthy, me too. We could rule the world or something. But he knew he was on God's course. He had wrestled with God already. He had gotten a new name. So he declines and he turns away. He doesn't become entangled. So the actions that I saw that were taken, and this is what really got to me about having God's authority, is that it isn't just about our words. It's not about how we pray and saying all the right things. It's the actions that we are taking along with it. And so he cried out to God. He cried out to God and asked for help. He said, rescue me. I can't do this alone. I can't do it on my own. He sent a tribute ahead, and he didn't take it back. So he set apart something. He did what God told him. I don't know. He did what was in his heart to do. That's what he did. Whether that was from God or not, I don't know. But he did what was in his heart to do, so he did it. Whether it was out of fear or whatever, he did it, but he stuck to it. He wrestled with the divine. Just like Alyssa said, we all do it. We do it with, I loved when you said we do it with our sin as well. We do. We try to justify things sometimes. And he won't have it. But he wrestled, and then he wouldn't let go. He wouldn't let go until he was blessed. When he went to his brother, he humbled himself. He bowed before him, all the way approaching him. He humbled himself. We have to do that. It's one of the hardest things that we are called upon to do. But we have to humble ourselves before our brothers and sisters. Not just before God, because what God showed me is that to humble ourselves before God is to humble ourselves before one another, because that's where he dwells. He dwells in us. And if we can't humble ourselves to another person, we can't humble ourselves to him. He doesn't accept it, is my feeling. And then he didn't stray from his path. He stayed firmly in his pathway that God had called him to. And he went to Sukkot. I just thought an interesting note about that was that when he went there, he built shelters for animals. It was probably the first time recorded that shelters for animals were built. And named the place after the shelters for the animals, for the livestock that was built. Not for other grander things, but for that. And I just thought that was just an interesting note that I read. But God gives us authority to use his name, to charge the angels or messengers. And so the way to use it is in our actions, not just our words. So we need to know what to say, but we need to back it up with the submission, the obedience, the walking in his ways, to not going against him. So we can pray and pray, we can bind and loose with our words, but if our actions don't coincide, then they are powerless. They are totally powerless. And that's what I have in that. Another thought, I guess, and I'll just quickly say that, but is that I see some people who struggle, who are struggling. Like I said, we bring it on many times by opening doors, but we struggle with things, and sometimes we see people, or we ourselves go around and around and around the same mountain, and it's painful to watch the people you love do that, or to do it for yourself. It's painful to not see victory and overcoming when we can see I cannot get out of my head the message that Pastor Cook gave at our grand opening was the phrase, get up. You know, it's like you want to overcome some of the crud or be motivated, then you have to get up. That's the first step. You have to get up. And I thought, yes, you have to take a step somewhere. You've got to move forward. And then he comes and equips and moves in you, and he dwells in us. And I just loved singing Emmanuel today. It's like, yes, I'm so thankful we have a God who lives in us, who directs us. He lives in us. He gives us that guidance everywhere we go. So, in concluding all of that, I just wanted to open it up for some discussion now, either on what Alyssa had to say, because that was excellent. Very good stuff. And I thought it was just so interesting. So I see the focus was definitely, it wasn't just that we were lazy and didn't get past the first story. It really wasn't. It was just what God really quickened to our hearts, you know, and said, this is the message for today.